unofficial ASMR video with a storytelling of the Annotated Brothers Grimm. I have some lovely orange fabric here, and I'm wearing this lovely this bracelet I thought might make some nice sounds, but I'm going to take it off so it's not too distracting. Not too distracting for you. So, without further ado, here is the Annotated Brothers Grimm. I'm going to pick out some stories here and just try it out. So here we have the annotated, this book I think I received as a gift some years ago. And I love books and stories. So let's see. Let's pick out a story to tell. Let's see. I think I'm just going to pick one. Maybe I will do the gruesome tale of the Juniper Tree. Or, let's see, is there any that have or the Seven Ravens, maybe. Maybe I'll just do the Juniper Tree because I did point that one out, which is on page 208. This is a nice feather. Maybe I should use this when reading the Seven Ravens. But anyway, I also just wanted to look at some of the illustrations from this book because they are lovely. I'll probably do another video on illustrations, fairy tale illustrations, because I really love a lot of fairy tale illustrations. .206. Looks like we're getting close. 206. And here we have 208, the Juniper Tree. So let's see. The Juniper Tree, which is a bit of a gruesome tale. Let's see. Okay. The Juniper Tree has a rich folkloric tradition. Let's see, let's place this back over here. I don't have as long of nails to do tapping sounds. Let's see, but I can see, I do love the sound of pages turning, though. So, here we have. Okay, I'll go back to what I was reading. Maybe using a porcupine quill will be a nice tool. It's very sharp. So the juniper has a rich folkloric tradition. It's oil, ashes, berries, leaves, and bark are used in many cultures for healing purposes, and it is the therapeutic powder of the tree that seems to make it a natural choice for the resting place for the boy. In Russia, the juniper tree is a birch. In England, it is a rose tree. The versions of the stories published in the Grimm's collection come from the pen of the Romantic artist Philip Otto Runge. sent the Grimm a stylized narrative which used, I don't know if I can say that word, Dutch, or Low German stylized narrative, or Low German, to convey the impression of artless narration. Runge's version of the story is the only one that weds the biological mother so closely to nature. When she becomes fertile and conceives, she is turned into a virtual prisoner of nature, subject to its laws of growth and decay. An elaborate duet coordinates the rhythms of the child's gestation period with nature's seasonal changes. The juniper tree has been seen as a ghoulish nursery counterpart to the Greek myth of Kronos, who devours his children in order to ensure they will not usurp his power. So, it tells of a powerful generational conflicts that are resolved once the harmful members of the family are expelled. Like many tales from the oral tradition, the juniper tree is restlessly fixated on orality. It begins with the hero's mother wishing for a child. Oh wait, is this going to be a long introduction of this story? I guess it's the annotated version, so like many restlessly fixated orality, it begins with the hero's mother wishing for a child while she is peeling an apple, then recounts her death in childbirth after she is gorged on juniper berries. Ingestion and gestation are, as Marina Warner has pointed out, so braided together in the tale that it is hard to detangle where breeding ends and eating begins, which I really always love it when there's these kind of visceral, metaphorical elements. Much of the great storytelling, that's why it resonates with us. It uses a lot of those things that are kind of universal, like they're saying with nature. Cycles. So, the stepmother decapitates. Well, I guess perhaps it's a bit of a spoiler to read this part first. Maybe we should read the story first. We could go back to that, but it's possible that might just be too much right now. But I can go back if we need to. Maybe I'll just read the story. As many as 2,000 years ago, I'll just make this little note here. The specification of an era of unnatural fairy tales. The figure of 2,000 years anchors the tale in biblical terms and suggests a connection with the birth of Christ. In light of the boy's death and resurrection, the date has a special significance. Okay, these are just notes because 2 will be referenced in the text here. So, a long time ago, as many as 2,000 years ago, there's the little reference here. I gotta read this other one too. There lived a rich man with a wife who was both beautiful and good. They loved each other dearly, but they had no children, even though they longed for them day and night. The wife prayed for a child, but still they had none. I will switch up to a new pointer here. In front of the house there was a garden, and in the garden there grew a juniper tree. Once in the winter time the wife was peeling an apple under the tree and while she was peeling it, she cut her finger. Oh, blood dripped, which makes this one very relevant. Just a nice little bloody thing here. Blood dripped on the snow. Ah, the woman said as she sighed deeply. Oh, that's my little pin here. Come out. If only I had a child, as red as blood and as white as the snow. After she had spoken those words, she was happy, for she had a feeling that something would come of it. But she went back into the house. A month went by, and the snow melted. 2 months passed, and everything had become green. 3 months went by, and the flowers were sprouting from the ground. 4 months went by, and all the trees in the woods were growing tall, with their green branches intertwining. The woods echoed with the song of the birds, and blossoms were dropping from the trees. And so the 5th month went by, and with that the woman sat under the juniper tree. Her heart leaped for joy beside herself. Leaped for joy because the tree was so fragrant. She fell to her knees and was beside herself with happiness. When the 6th month had passed, the fruit grew large and firm and she became very quiet. In the 7th month, she picked the berries from the juniper tree and gorged herself on them until she became miserable and was ailing. After the 8th month went by, she called her husband and in tears said to him, "If I die, bury me under the juniper tree." After that she felt better and was calm until the 9th month had passed. Then she bore a child as white as snow and as red as blood. When she saw the child, she felt so happy that she had died for joy. The woman's husband, The man's second wife gave birth to a daughter. The child from his first marriage was a little boy, as red as blood and as white as snow. When the woman looked at her daughter, she felt nothing but love for her. But when she looked at the little boy, she felt sick at heart. It seems that no matter what he did, he was in the way. And the woman kept wondering how she could make sure that her daughter eventually inherited everything. The devil got hold of her, so that she began to hate the little boy. Oh, the poor little boy. And she slapped him around and pinched him here and cuffed him there. Cuffed. The poor child lived in terror. And when he came home from school, he had no peace at all. One day when the woman went into the pantry, her little daughter followed her and asked, "Mother, will you give me an apple?" "All right, my dear," said the woman, and she gave her a beautiful apple from the chest that had a big, heavy lid with a sharp iron lock on it. Mother asked the little girl, "Can brother have one too?" The mother was irritated, but she said, "Yes, he can have one when he gets back from school." The woman looked out the window, and when she saw the little boy walking home, it was as if sorry, I lost my place. Let's see. Okay. The woman looked out the window when she saw the boy walking home. It was as if the devil had taken Then she snatched the apple out of the daughter's hand and said, "You can't have one before your brother." Then she tossed the apple into the chest and shut it. The little boy walked out the door, and the devil caught her, just whisper sweetly to him and say, "My son, would you like an apple?" But she gave him a look filled with hate. "Mother," said the little boy, "what a scary look." "Yes, give me an apple." When the little boy bent down, the devil prompted her, and bam! She slammed the lid down so hard that the boy's head flew off and fell into the chest with the apples. What horror! Then she was overcome with fear and thought, "How am I going to get out of this?" She went to her room and took a white kerchief from her treasure drawer back on his neck and tied the scarf around it so that you couldn't tell that anything was wrong. Then she sat him down on a chair in front of the door and put an apple in his hand. Later on, little Marlene came to the kitchen to see her mother, who was standing by the fire, madly stirring a pot of water. "Mother," said little Marlene, "brother is sitting by the door and looks pale. He has an apple in his hand. When I asked him to give me the apple, he wouldn't answer. It was very scary. Go back to him." Part 2 of the Juniper Tree, let's just say. So, here we go. I still have this one as well. Let's move this over here. Back to the story of the Juniper Tree. The lovely Juniper Tree. So let's see, where were we? So let's see, is apple. So I think we were here, around here. So brother is sitting by the door and looks pale. He has an apple in his hand. And when I asked him to give me the apple, he wouldn't. It was very, very scary. Go back to him, the mother said. And if he doesn't give you an answer, slap his face. Little Marlene went back to him and said, "Brother, give me the apple." Her brother wouldn't answer, so Marlene gave him a slap, and his head went flying off. She was terrified. She was so terrified that she began to howl and weep. Then she ran to her mother and said, "Mother," knocked brother's head right off. And she was crying so hard that she couldn't stop. Little Marlene, said her mother with a dread, "What a dreadful thing you've done. But don't breathe a word to a soul, for there's nothing that we can do. We'll cook him up in a stew." The mother then took the little boy and chopped him up. She put the pieces The stew didn't need any salt at all because of her tears. When the father came home, he sat down at the table and said, "Where's my son?" The mother brought in a huge dish of stew, and little Marlene was weeping so hard that she couldn't stop. "Where's my son?" the father asked again. "Oh," said the mother, "he went off to the country to visit his mother's great uncle. He is planning to stay there a while. What is he going to do there? He didn't even say goodbye to me." Well, he really wanted to go. And he asked if he could stay for 6 weeks. They'll take good care of him. "Oh, that makes me so sad," said the husband. "It's not right. He should have said goodbye." Then he began eating and said, "Little Marlene, why are you crying? Your brother will be back soon." And he said, "Oh, dear wife, the stew tastes so good. Give me some more." Here we go. Here's a lovely illustration, as you can see. The more the father ate, the more he wanted. "Give me some more," he said. "No one else can have any of it. Somehow I feel as if it's all for me." The father kept eating, and he threw the bones under the table until he had finished everything. Meanwhile, little Marlene went to her dresser and got her black best silk kerchief. She picked up all the bones from beneath the table, tied them up in her silk kerchief, and carried them outside, where she began weeping bitter tears while she was putting the bones down in the green grass under the juniper tree. Once she had finished, she suddenly felt much better and stopped crying. The juniper tree began stirring. Its branches parted and came back together again as though it were clapping its hands for joy. The mist arose from the tree, and right in the middle of the mist a flame was burning. And from the flame a beautiful bird emerged and began singing gloriously. It soared up into the air and vanished. The tree was just as it had always been before, but the kerchief with the bones was gone. Little Marlene felt so happy and light-hearted because it seemed as if her brother were still alive. She returned home feeling content and sat down at the table to eat. Meanwhile, the bird flew away, perched on the roof of a goldsmith's house, and began singing. "My mother, she slew me. My father, he ate me. My sister, Marlene, gathered my bones, then tied them up in silk for the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a fine bird am I." A goldsmith was sitting in his shop making a chain of gold. He heard a bird singing on the roof, and he found its song very beautiful. He got up, and when he crossed, as you can see, she's beneath the juniper tree, I suppose. just looking up. Watches in awe as the bird of the same hue as her dress emerges from the flames and begins singing. There's the bird, it looks like. So it's the tree, I suppose. The bird is rising up. And Marlene there. It's very kind of like floral, fabric. Imagine this could have been like a tapestry. Looks a little bit, reminds me of that. Something you'd embroider into fabric. So, I might be going too slow with this. 2:15. So let's see when he crossed. Okay, when he crossed. Let's see how many pages are left of this. Oh, I'm being too slow to read these. This is a long story. A longer one than. Okay. Might need to redo this. Okay, let's see. Threshold, he lost his slipper. Still, he kept right on going out into the middle of the street. With only one sock and one slipper on, he was also wearing his apron, and in one hand he had the golden chain. In the other, his tongs. The sun was shining brightly in the street. He stopped to look at the bird and said, "Bird, you sing so beautifully. Sing me a song again." "No," said the bird. I never sing a song a second time. I never sing a second time for nothing. If you give me that golden chain, I'll sing for you again. "Here," said the goldsmith, "here's the golden chain. Now sing that song again." The bird came swooping down, grasping the golden chain in his right claw, perched in front of the goldsmith, and began singing. My mother, she slew me. My father, he ate me. My sister, Marlene, gathered my bones, tied them in silk for the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a fine bird am I. Then the bird flew off to a shoemaker's house perched on the roof and sang, "My mother, she slew me. My father, he ate me. My sister, Marlene, gathered my bones, tied them in silk for the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a fine bird am I. I am a fine bird," yes. When the shoemaker heard the song, he ran out the door in his shirt sleeves and looked up at the roof. He had to put his hand over his eyes to keep the sun from blinding him. "Bird," he said, "you sing so beautifully." Then he called into the house, "Wife, come out here for a moment. There's a bird up there. See it? How beautifully it sings. It is singing." The shoemaker called his daughter and her children, his apprentices, into the street to look at the bird and to admire its beauty. Its red and green feathers around its neck was a band of pure gold, and his eyes in his head sparkled like stars. "Bird," said the shoemaker, "I sing that song again." "No," said the bird, I never sing a second time for nothing. You have to give me something." "Wife," said the man, "go up to the attic. On the top shelf, you'll find a pair of red shoes. Get them for me." His wife went and got the shoes. "Here," said the man, "now sing that song again." The bird came swooping down, taking the shoes in its left claw. It flew back up on the roof and sang, "My mother, she slew me. clickety-clack, clickety-clack. And so the bird went and perched on a linden tree outside the mill and sang. My mother, she slew me. And when the men stopped working, my father, he ate me. And two more stopped working and listened. My sister, Marlene. The four men stopped working, gathered my bones, tied them in silk. Now only 8 were still hewing. For the now only 5, Juniper Tree. Now only 1, tweet, tweet. What a fine bird am I. Then the last one stopped to listen to the final words. Bird, he said, you sing so beautifully. Let me hear the whole thing too. Sing that song again. If it belonged to be alone, he said, I would give it to you. If the bird sings again, the other said, it can have the millstone. Then the bird swooped down, and the miller's men, all 20 of them, set the beam to and raised up the stone. Heave-ho up, heave-ho up, heave-ho up. And the bird stuck its neck through the hole, put the stone on as if it were a collar, flew back to the tree and sang. My mother, she slew me. My father, he ate me. My sister, Marlene, gathered my bones, tied them in silk for the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a fine bird I am. When the bird had finished its song, it spread its wings. In its right claw was the millstone. Then it flew away, far away to the house of its father. The father, mother, and little Marlene were sitting at the table in the parlor. And the father said, how happy I am. My heart feels so light. Not me, said the mother. I feel frightened, as if a big storm were on its way. Meanwhile, little Marlene just sat there weeping. The bird flew up, and when it landed on the roof, the father said, how happy I am feeling. And outside the sun is shining so brightly. I feel as if I'm about to see an old friend again. I don't, said the woman. I'm so scared that my teeth are chattering, and I feel as if there's fire running through my veins. She tore at her bodice to loosen it. Little Marlene sat there weeping. She held her apron up to her eyes and cried so hard that it was completely soaked with tears. The bird swooped down to the juniper tree perched on a branch and sang. My mother, she slew me. The bird stopped up her ears. The mother stopped up her ears and closed her eyes, for she didn't want to see or hear anything, but the roaring in her ears was like the wildest possible storm, and her eyes burned and flashed like lightning. My father, he ate me. Oh, mother, said the man. There's a beautiful bird out there, and it's singing so gloriously. The sun is shining so warmly, and the air smells like cinnamon. My sister Marlene. Little Marlene put her head in her lap and just kept crying and crying. But the husband said, husband went out and looked at the bird, gathered my bones, tied them in silk for the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a fine bird am I. After finishing its song, the bird dropped the golden chain, and it felt right around the man's neck, hanging perfectly from it. He went inside. Just look at the fine bird in there. It gave me this beautiful golden chain, almost as beautiful as the bird is. The woman was so terrified that she fell right down on the floor, and the cap she was wearing came off her head. And once again the bird sang, "My mother, she slew me. Oh, if only I were 1,000 feet under the ground so that I wouldn't have to listen to this. My father, he ate me." Then the woman fell down again as if dead. "My sister Marlene." "Oh," said the little Marlene, "I went to go outside and see if the bird will give me something too." And she went out, gathered my bones, and tied them in silk. And the bird tossed her the shoes for the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a fine bird am I. Little Marlene felt light-hearted and happy. She put on the new shoes and kept dancing and skipping into the house. "Oh, little Marlene," said, I was so sad when I went out, and now I feel so cheerful. What a fine bird is that out there. It gave me a pair of red shoes." The woman jumped to her feet, and her hair stood straight on end, like tongues of fire. "It is as if the world were coming to an end. If I go outside, maybe I will feel better too." The woman went over to the door, and bam, the bird dropped the millstone on her head and crushed her to death. The father and little Marlene heard the crash. Little Marlene heard the crash and went outside. Smoke, flames, and fire were rising up then. Up from the spot where they had vanished, little brother was back, and right there, standing right there, he took his father and little Marlene by the hand. The three of them were filled with joy. Then they went back to the house, sat down at the table, and dined. The end. This little thing on the thing here, it says, "Sit down at the table and dined." The trio at the end partake of a meal almost as if it were a sacrament, recalling this sacrilege of the stew served up to the Father. Here the dining ritual renews and restores the new family, although for some critics it's seen as an allegory staging of the consolidation of patriarchal power. Let's hope it's not the latter. Anyway, so here's the beautiful bird and little Marlene, I'm assuming, right here. So that's the end of the tale. Forgive my interruptions and less than perfect reading. This might be a bit too long. So, the juniper tree is unsettled by the complexities of the biological mother's association with nature and death. It still stands in sharp contrast to the horrors of the tale's main events engineered largely by the stepmother. The biological mother is presented as the natural foil to the stepmother, who represents self-consciousness and artifice in its most dreaded and dreadful form. The co-presence of birth and death is inscribed in the first scene, then doubled and repeated as rebirth and murder in the body of the tale. The juniper bashing the mother and joining the father, the children have been seen as successfully negotiating. I just skipped ahead to this. The path from dependence to autonomy. It is important to bear in mind that versions of this tale and others are secret only as cultural documents mapping the development, mental routes of another era. Enough has changed and is changing since Philip Otto recorded this tale for us to begin producing variants on this cultural story which demonizes mothers in a powerful way and represents fathers as passive and detached. They have lots of other little annotated. I just kind of skipped to the end of the description there to conclude, but thank you for joining me. I guess I didn't get to show off some other things like these lovely little binoculars, but it's not as if you really can see through them, so